stressful.
And they'll have a little bit. You can't wait till noon of it, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
But hi, Steve.
Hi, I just wanted to. This is Trice.
Hi, nice to meet you.
To meet you, Trice.
And I heard that Steve got you set up with a microphone there, so
Yeah. Steve's the man.
hopefully we're in good shape.
Yep.
You know, I got your slides up there. You know, we will have some folks joining remotely through Zoom, so you know, if you need to interact with the Zoom folks, give me a holler. I can put the the gallery view up on one of the screens.
Okay. Yeah. You can open it up for questioning at any time. I mean, if there's any engagement, I'll take it.
Yeah, for sure.
If there's any engagement, I'll take it.
I think we have an in-person virtual moderator, but I don't know who it is.
So.
I would have to check with Renee.
Yeah.
I'll find her quick and check. I don't think we want to. I want to get started soon because I don't want to get off schedule. I want to get people
Well, yeah, we want to actually have some folks here in the room.
Yeah,
start, so.
exactly. So I'll go. I have to talk to someone first, and then I'll. People are coming.
Yeah.
So.
People are folks filtering in.
All right. So I have to run and stuff. I'll find Mark also and see if he's able to introduce you.
You can't. Just goals in about 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. I'll get up there.
I'll be right here.
Yeah, I mean, like, we can get, I think a set of 2 should be way cheaper than, well, you would need a set maybe a 3 or 4, but a smaller set seems like it should be way cheaper. And, you know, they have a little battery charger that you dock the batteries onto. It's a module on this side. And I think there's like a car charger for the batteries as well, which is probably of interest for that use.
Thank you, by the way.
Oh, you're welcome. Sorry it was a little hectic, but I'm glad that it all worked out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The first thing I used these for was that thing.
I'll look at it and see it. Thank you for checking on that. I gotta talk to Mark.
Keep it going.
What board?
first one right up. So you're brave, the most courageous.
So there's a microphone up there, but let's talk to Tom. Tell him what's going on. Because I figured I kind of had to get going. We just want to let you know Mark is going to introduce himself. Okay? He can do. Okay. I mean, it's up to you. We probably start here in just a minute. That's kind of what I thought. All right, you can talk to Trice and make sure. All right, well, there you go. There's your answer. All right. Yeah, that wouldn't be good. Okay, Steve, did you write down She doesn't want to know. So. But I'm available. Hey, good afternoon. I hope each of you are enjoying the conference and getting a chance to network and visit sponsors and check out the hospitality suites, both upstairs and down here in the ballroom, and that the conference is running smooth in your estimation. That's our hope. Well, today I have the privilege to introduce one of our featured speakers today, Trice Batson. I want to just share briefly with you, when I was hired into Kalamazoo Valley Community College, I was required, and I'm going to use the term required, I was kind of apprehensive about that, to fulfill a number of onboarding courses. And many of them were with Trice. I didn't know that. But I can tell you, after being in the classroom for 25 years and attending numerous in-services and like that, I go, oh no, I have to do these onboarding classes. I guess I can suffer through them. And I was completely wrong. I actually enjoyed them very much. And I'm not just saying that because Trice is in the audience here, but he brought a great perspective to different kinds of things that just raised my awareness. And I think a lot of the things in the world today that have happened and people are unhappy is because we haven't raised our awareness of different topics, especially as they relate to the topics of diversity and inclusion and equity. And we hear these more and more in our news, and hopefully we'll have a better society in the future. I'd like to welcome Trice Batson today to share some other perspectives that we've had shared with us in past conferences at Michigan State and at Toledo. And I look forward to hearing what Trice has to share today. So if you'd please welcome Trice Batson.
Appreciate that. I think I have a lapel mic, but thank you.
Oh, okay, I can turn that on.
No, thank you. Yeah, please turn that one off. So, how is everyone doing this afternoon, evening? Good? Oh, we got a lively bunch here. I was kind of worried. Let me be honest about that. Just want to make sure I say thank you. As I look around the room, I can tell you, I was just talking to some gentlemen over here. One of the things I struggle with right off the back is, as we talk about different issues around DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, I was trying to make a connection. I'm always trying to make a connection and something that would be relevant and hit home. So I think one of the things is, let's cut one of these microphones off maybe. Or maybe you guys back there do it.
Yeah, we're
Okay, you're good. Appreciate it, Tom. So I'm a very transparent person, and so maybe that's what Mark has picked up on over the years as we talk about various things. I try to do it with some mindfulness and be very thoughtful about, who we're talking to and where they may be in the journey in regards to DEI, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. So a little bit about me. I just finished a master's program at Western Michigan University in organizational change leadership. And I was going through this master's program as I took on this job as Director of Diversity and Inclusion. And so we just had, and bless her soul, our previous president was Marilyn Slack. She was the president of our college for like 35 years. Like, she reigned 35 years as one president. And so if you can imagine, as we try to change from this president now having a black male president, there's a lot of transformation that we are still going through today. So I will start this conversation by saying that we are doing a great job at running on this path and being on this journey of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but we have a long way to go. being in a lot of conferences and different type of workshops and task force, committees, work groups from across the nation. You know, I see other colleges and institutions and organizations that aren't where we are, and I see others that are eons beyond us. So I'm just greasing my next 30 minutes with that to say, like, you know, this is just from where we are right now. So we say culture of collaboration because that is what has worked for us thus far. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward. Before that, I want to make sure that in regards to engagement, I want to be engaged. If you have questions, raise your hand. I already talked to Tom in the back. For those that are joining us virtually, if you see questions there, let me know, because I'm more a conversationalist than I am going to be a talking head up here at you. That's what I really don't like to do, but will engage that as well. Introvert by nature, so this is a heavy lift, but at the same time, I love doing it because I think the information that I have to share is, although finding the struggle to connect, that's just because I don't know what you folks endear here with the Great Lakes Planetary Association. So I've been doing a lot of research. I've been joining and looking through Twitter virtually to see people posting different things. So it looks like you've been having some fun. Who's from Michigan, really quick? Anyone from Michigan? Okay, so we got some Michiganders. Who's from the Midwest? And I met a guy that's out here from San Francisco, and I asked him, why did he come back here? You know, I've been to San Francisco a few times, but, you know, it's a beautiful place. Not that Michigan isn't, but you see what we got going on outside today, right? So, didn't even know how to dress for it. I went home and I changed clothes like 3 times. Like, I don't even know what we're doing. So, let me go ahead and move through. Is this working for me? So, let's start with leadership, right? So, one of the things we're going to be looking at is from leadership perspective, if we're going to change or what we've done in regards to our process of this DEI journey is really looking at leadership. It does take leadership from the executive board to the cabinet members to whatever your organization or institution looks like. It has to come from the top. This is not just me saying it, not just my experience, but this is research that tells us this. I have an analogy or a metaphor, whatever you want to call it. Who here has siblings? Okay, and if that sibling tells you to do the dishes, what's your answer? No. Exactly, right? You do it, okay? But if mom and or dad or your guardian tells you to do it, you're probably more likely to do it, I'm assuming, right? So it's one of those type of things that's kind of just what happens with this. So it has to come from leadership to begin with. So that's one of the things that we've been able to do is really take the leadership perspective and then lead from the top, model the behavior. Not just from the president's position, but just above the president is the board of trustees. And so that's what we're going to kind of talk about here today. As we talk about this collaboration or this culture of collaboration, it is everyone's job. Now, this is what we're going to do. We're going to learn about the KVCC process, what it looks like on paper, and then we're going to give some examples. It gets a little wordy and nerdy towards the end, but I'll try to get through those as best as possible. But if you see something that sparks your interest, or you have a pushback on something, again, I love the conversation and I love the engagement, okay? So, from our board of trustees, just jumping right in, here's our goals. And what I'm going to ask you to do as I move through this presentation is to challenge yourself to look at your organization, because again, I can't do that for you, but challenge yourself to put your organization in our spot, and then you try to make the connection and see where the relevancies are, okay? But for us, this is what it meant. We really looked at what we do as a college, who we are trying to target and who we want to serve, and it starts with our students. And this is all, at the end of the day, we're a student serving, we're a service institution. We take our strategic plan, back up one, our board of trustees, gets information from our president. We have a lot of discussions on these, and then we look at it from a strategy standpoint. What is that strategy? And this is a lot of conversation. This is a lot of leadership listening, going out into these different factions, into these different units, these different departments of the organization, and actually listening and engaging them in the conversation to ask them, what do they want? What do they need? What are we missing? So it's listening, it's learning, and then now trying to put this into action. And this is what we were able to gather over the last 4 or 5 years is, you see everything that's in the color there, right? Because you got your student success, quality education, community impact, and I underline engagement because that's what we're really going to key in on today is engagement. And then you have resource and management. Another part of that process, and it's a very important piece of the process, because one of the things we find in higher education is the aspect of accountability. In my 9 years in higher education, accountability is kind of a dirty word. It is hard to hold people accountable just because sometimes of the vast size of an organization, even a community college, roughly 1,000 employees. But how do you hold people accountable, especially with something around diversity, equity, and inclusion? So we have to systematically infuse accountability into the process. And so this second bullet point here talks about the measurement of these with KPIs, or key performance indicators. And we'll get to that a little later. I know that this is wordy, but when we talk about the process, this is what it is. Oftentimes, people ask, what's the magic pill? What's the silver bullet with DEI? That's from race or ability or LGBTQ+. What is the magic pill to get it? People want to come and do a workshop and they want it to be, that is it. And this is going to help you be culturally competent or culturally, humble, or this is going to help you be that anti-racist person, or this is going to help you with the equity in your classroom or equity-centered learning environment. There is no magic pill. There is no silver bullet. Change processes take years. I don't know what the stat is, but I once heard that when you break up from a person in a relationship, how long does it take for you to get over? Anyone hear that? It's for every year or month you was with that person, it takes double that time, right? Something like that. So it's kind of the same concept. So we're talking about, for us right now, we speak for ourselves. I'm going to speak, that's all I know is Kalamazoo Valley Community College. We've been on this transformational change journey, and we're like 4 or 5 years in. Our Office of Diversity and Inclusion was created 6 years ago in January. We see some changes, and we got a whole lot to go. There's pockets of resistance. What does that resistance look like? And I ask you, what does that pocket of resistance look like in what you do on a daily basis? For us, well, it's data, right? There's anecdotal conversations, there's qualitative data that we have that tell us where some of our resistance is, but until we actually get the quantitative data that we now have, is now that people start to believe. But it's like, hey, we've been telling you this for the last 20 years, but now that we have the quantitative data, we actually have the statistics and the number, now that is a different thing. Now, some of the naysayers or some of the resistance wants to come along. So you're going to get into that and understand that's what that looks like. But for us, it's been, oh, that's what that is. So you have to create a system to change a system. And I'll say that again, you have to create a system to change the system. So that's what we've done in here, is created these key performance indicators, now to hold every department accountable and to say, hey, not just a beat over the head, but let's have these conversations about what change looks like. Why is DEI important for us? It hits our bottom line. If you know anything about higher education, it's under fire because people just don't believe in college. The students and the kids aren't coming to college, they're dropping off. Western Michigan University just said they have 7.1% drop off in enrollment. For us, it's really looking at a lot of our faculty. We'll continue on. So engagement. So as I talked about the engagement piece, this is where engagement is very, 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 very key. Because this is what we believe, and we continue to push this envelope. We continue to have this message. It's a consistent message of engagement. Key initiatives, inclusivity and diversity, that's a global thing. It's college-wide. It's not just one department. It's everyone's responsibility. International students, staff, and faculty, and this is across the board. Okay? So, since we have been established over 50 years, KVCC has really looked at inclusivity and diversity as being a top priority. But one of the things we saw is it wasn't moving the way that we wanted it to move. So what do? We create an Office of Diversity and Inclusion to help us move in that direction. And again, here's that other theme is diversity and inclusion efforts are integrated across the campus. How do we get that across the campus, or how do we push that message? Diversity and inclusion, my particular office has its own strategy. It has its own strategic goals. And this is what is very important to someone like me to now have a teeth, right? If you want to call it that, to have a bite, to have the authority to go into a department. Because I don't know about you, but I know something else. Again, titles have teeth. They mean something. If you're a coordinator, what does that mean? If you're an associate, if you're a director or a VP, you walk into a room, these things mean something. So one of the things that we really, really looked at is foster continued growth of underrepresented backgrounds in the presence of the faculty and staff. What does that mean? That means that when you look at our faculty and staff, it's north of 90% identify as Caucasian or white. Okay? That's not horrible, but if you have a student body that's roughly 25% student of color, you can always do better. And not to make it racial, but I always tell folks this. What's the number one rule in investing? What should you do with your portfolio? Say it again. One more time. You want to diversify your portfolio. Why? Minimize risk. The other way around that, too, it definitely what you're talking financially, but for us, that's where innovation lies. Right? You can't always have yes people. But I'm going to leave that there. But that's how sometimes we get around that conversation by just asking folks, we can just better diversify our portfolio of instructors and faculty and staff overall, period. So I ask you, what does that mean for your organization, your institution, your association, and what you do? Promote faculty and staff awareness of diversity and inclusion. Educate and promote standards of inclusion for equitable treatment of all individuals. I'm going to pause really quick. I've said a lot. Any comments? Please.
Many of us who work in universities, especially if we've been there for a while, have been subjected to various new schemes that somebody woke up and let's make a strategic plan. And you, when you're new to this, you think, okay, yeah, this is it. And you spend a lot of time in meetings and people say words, and then everybody walks away. And very
patience. Okay? That's a term I learned in a conference about 4 or 5 years ago. And diversity fatigue is a thing. I have a lot of faculty, I have a lot of people of color that are in the institution where I'm at. They're jaded because of what you said. There's a lot of talking going on. We're done with the talking. But you have to have a leadership that pushes the envelope regardless. And you have to be able to define what is diversity, what is equity, what is inclusion, what does that success look like. And I know maybe some of you have heard of SMART goals, and so you have to really break what those things look like down into really small goals. And for us, it was diversifying our executive leadership board or room, what that looked like. And over the last 5 years, that has been diversified a whole lot. So as a cabinet member now myself, I look at that's success. It's small, but it is success. And these things trickle down. This is generational work. We tell people all the time, some of the things that we do, you're not going to see it while you're at the institution. But again, I say I've had the luxury, I've been blessed that I have a president, Dr. Washington, who's come in and he understands it. He gets it. He's been super strategic. He understands that there's just certain landmines and potholes that he's going to have to maneuver around and that he's going to have to deal with. So it's not an overnight success. And for those people that have been there for multiple years, it could be unfortunate that you don't actually see some of the bigger, splashy successes that we would want to see. But going back to answer your question directly, it just takes the urgent patience and defining what does that look like for you within 5 years. So again, that's why when we'll talk about the KPIs, I think that helps break it down into, like for us, the 2021-2023 Diversity and Inclusion Strategic Plan allows us to now put metrics behind it. What does that look like, right? There's something, just the little things. It could be art. How much artwork of people of color, or how much artwork, or how many people of different abilities have we hired? It's just small things, but you have to be able to have those conversations within your, group, and just really define what those small successes look like that are going to lead to the bigger ones. So I think that's a good. I hope I answered that, but it's kind of nuanced. But it depends on the institution. Really, it does. Anybody else? Question, comment, concern, suggestion? Please. Yeah, absolutely. There's been a lot of it. What's your name? Gene. Like Gene suggested, Gene has been somewhere for quite some time, it sounds like. And we had a lot of faculty, staff, members that, again, our institution is roughly 54, 55 years old. And we've had people that's been there decades. And people are afraid of change. And so that resistance comes in a lot of different ways of just not wanting to show up like something like this. That's part of it. Or they just refuse to, sign off, or it's so covert, but you know it when you see it. You know what I mean? I think you know what I'm trying to say here, right? But so yes, to answer your question, but when you continue along with the agenda, eventually people will either come along or people will get off the train. When my president was hired, there was a mass exodus. And I don't want to sound so extreme, but some people just, we're not going to deal with this. We're not going to do this, right? And then there's some people that's just stay behind, and so it comes in so many forms and fashion. But when you have leadership that pushes the agenda regardless, relentless with it, then you can see it happen. So, anyone else? Thank you for those questions. So, as we paint this broad stroke across the rest of the college, and we talk about a culture of collaboration. When I took the helm, these are the different departments or programs or initiatives that were already in collaboration. And that's super important, is to do the work to understand what you are already doing in that regard. So many of these, areas didn't even know that they were providing support and allyship to diversity and inclusion, to the initiative itself. So I meet with all these folks and just kind of say, thank you, you're doing the work. So right now, one of our goals is to highlight these areas and model them, or really put the spotlight on them to say, hey, here's Jean, and we do an article in our monthly publications to say this is what Jean is doing. Jean is a model of success around diversity and inclusion. Jean invited me into her class, or Jean has created this program, or she does this. Whatever it is Jean is doing, someone spots that and says, hey, Jean, thank you. As opposed to telling people what you're not doing and being negative and having these shouting matches and things like that. No, we're just highlighting the positive things that folks are doing. And so that creates a culture of success in that way. So that has been successful, and we're going to continue doing it that way. So, but again, we highlight these programs because again, it is much easier with the positive word of mouth and the positive psychology, as opposed to just really saying this is what we're not doing and making people feel bad about it. So, but these are collaborators. These are folks that we talk to all the time, and we always have the conversations, and we try to bring them to the forefront and understand that it makes a difference in what we do, especially for our students, right? When you look at some of the things on here, our student engagement, our employee engagement, and then our KVAP program, as well as our food share, and we're gonna highlight KVAP here in just a second, because our KVAP program is a program that is an exercise in equity, okay? And so equity looks different depending on how you spin it. And I remember I had a conversation around this because I wanted to say, this is an exercise in equity. But I don't think it was seen as an exercise in equity at the time. And what this program does is it wraps its arms around some of our students that meet the criteria. And as it tells you, it gives them, it pays for their tuition, it pays for them to come to meetings, it pays for them to go to class, it pays for them to study, it provides some transportation fees. And what we've seen is that the folks that participate, the students that participate in this program, this is not a race-based or ethnicity-based program. This is a program based on socioeconomics. And more than half of the participants in this program identify as Caucasian or white. But I think at the time, it may have been seen as another one of those welfare programs, and we know what that means, right? It's typically for people of color. But it's not a program for people of color. It's a program for people that are struggling financially. So again, that's an exercise in equity of meeting those folks where they are and providing this type of wraparound service for them. So again, this has been a collaboration. This office was created just for this program, and it's seen a lot of success. Another exercise in equity is our food share program. And it's kind of a take, if you will, on a food pantry, but as it says there, I took that right off the website. Every Thursday, we have boxes of food that comes from our, one of our programs, our Food Innovation Center, that helps with processing and growing food. And there's a healthy, you come up with your KVCC student badge, and you get a box of food. And this is every Thursday. So again, this isn't a race-based program. This is a program based on the food insecurities that we know that so many people deal with, especially students. So again, when we look at DEI and what it does, or what it means for your institution, you're going to have that conversation of what it means for your institution. Define what DEI is, define what the success is, and what it looks like, and then strategize to move it forward. So again, just really trying to highlight and uplift and elevate these programs, because I think it's important for us to talk about the successes that we've had. So this is what it looks like on paper. I mean, in action. So this is where I say this next piece gets kind of wordy when you talk about doing the work and what it looks like. So I know that's hard to see. It's really nerdy. It's really wordy. But this is how we hold. This is for me, right? This is my KPIs. And you look at foster the continued growth of underrepresented people, right? So how do we now take that employee group that is predominantly white, and how do we better diversify that? So then we look at systematically our hiring practices. We look at where we are advertising our job postings, things like that. And for a metric, identify 12 candidates over a 12-month period. It's nothing that's that hard, but we just want to, that's a candidate a month that we are just really trying to push the envelope on. We also have created a diversity and bias in the search committee process for our hiring committees. That's the implicit bias and the conscious bias program that we have, and that all of our faculty and staff, at some point, it will be mandated. I think that conversation is out there somewhere. Don't quote me on it, but I know there's a talk out there. But to have this conversation about bias and how it really impacts the decisions that we make. And again, a lot of that isn't really race-based, but if someone is coming from South Dakota State University online, and we have, because I've seen this, I've been in the search committee where this happens, and one of the search committee members has a bias against that because it's an online program, right? So it's certain things like that those are just examples. Another piece is number 2, to promote faculty and staff awareness. So we've created booklets. You talk about DEI. We ask students, do you even know that we have a DEI program here at KVCC? And many of them say no. So we created booklets and brochures to, sporadically put around the college. And then we also infuse it into our orientation program. Then we do study tables with a lot of our athletes, and we bring them in, or they'll invite someone like me in to talk about culture, to talk about different aspects of bias, and so on and so forth. So we try to infuse this conversation. This isn't critical race theory. No, this is just culture that we're talking about. This is just being aware. We ask people, do you know what your culture are? I ask you, what is the culture of the Planetarium Association? What is the culture of the Great Lakes Planetarium Association? I'm gonna throw this out here. This is a live question. It's a live question. What's the culture of the Great Lakes Planetarium Association? Someone said nerds. Family. Support, collaboration. Generous. Community. Supportive. Good. So, I ask people that question a lot, and they don't really understand what culture is. So that's why I threw that out there. An instructor once told me about culture, and she said, imagine 2 fish, you might have heard of this before. 2 fish are swimming, all right? Just minding their own business, chatting it up, and another fish passes them up, older fish, and he says to the 2 younger fish, hey guys, how's the water? And the 2 younger fish look at each other and say, what is water? And that was profound to me, right? So when you talk about culture, when we talk about culture, again, it's not this overblaringly race-based thing. It's just getting people to think differently about certain things, right? So this is our way of looking at collaboration and how collaboration has been impactful and successful as we try to move our train down the road around diversity, equity, and inclusion. It switches, for a minute it was hardcore, let's be more diverse, and I think that's still part of it, but as we move forward, we're looking at Equity in there is also what does inclusive excellence look like. But right now, one of the bigger things for the college as a whole, we're looking at what is an equity-centered institution. And the data is showing that we have particular demographics that are struggling with graduation rates. And so why is that happening? So now we're really diving into that and what equity looks like and how do we make sure that we are not failing or helping those students in those failing demographics. How do we help them be more successful? So, questions, comments, concerns? Please. Yeah, I mean, what do you do about it? Does it matter? Do you care? I heard a yes. I got a handshake. I got a head shaking yes here. Got a hand up. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry for the delay in this question, but the KVAAP, when it was
KVAAP, KVAP?
right,
Yeah.
that's socioeconomic based.
Yes.
How is that a different program than a college giving a grant or a scholarship to a student? How is that?
Yeah, great question. So there's criteria of, and I don't know the details of it, but the criteria more so is where is this student in their college journey, and what is their, really, what is some of the things that's holding them back? So it's individual based, right? So in a lot of ways it is kind of a scholarship program, but where it's different is this particular student has this obligations of, in order for them to get the funding, they have to come to these meetings, they have to show up to these, there's these checkpoints on a weekly basis that they have to do in order to get this funding, where that's not necessarily the case with a grant and or a scholarship. As a recipient of some scholarships, typically you get a scholarship, you keep a GPA, however you want to keep that GPA, and then you move forward. But this one here is, no, we have them in a box almost to say that we are walking them to the success line. Thank you for the question. Yes?
Has staff always been included in all of the conversations? Has it ever been just faculty? And is there anything that's still only allowed faculty, say like the board? And how is that inclusive if that's the case?
No, it's all around. We just had a speaker or I guess for lack of a better term, maybe a consultant that joined us via Zoom 2 Fridays ago. And we invited our student success services and faculty. And so that's basically everyone that would want to show up. But we pinpointed faculty because when you talk about equity and learning in the classroom, in the learning environment, that was our focus. But the 360 of it all was just an equity-centered institution in general. So I'm answering your question to say yes, and there are some, say, your advisors and some counseling-centered things, and then there's some faculty and instructor-centered things, and then there's everything in between. Does that answer your question? Yes? And thank you for the question.
I have another one too.
Please.
I have many, but
Come on, let's do it.
There's a lot of similarities between EDI, conversations about DEI, and science communication. One of the things in science communication is building trust. We have to build trust with our audiences.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to say about that, just building trust along these conversations?
Oh yeah, trust is huge. And that's some of the things that like I said, we're not perfect. And that's some of the things that just came out in our, like I said, we had a consultant come and have this conversation, and we went into some I guess you could call it breakout rooms. And that was one, we had a morning session and an afternoon session. And in both sessions, trust was brought up, So trust is huge. Trust is you know, we're all kind of prisoners sometimes. You talk about bias. Some of us have PTS, depends on what happened in the past. And so as we try to really pull ourselves and show different than what it was in the past, and we have people that have been there for a long time and their trust has been broken. So we're still rebuilding trust, and that's going to look different for everyone. And how we do that is going to be different for everyone. But the biggest piece of it is listening, I believe, and then as we put these particular action plans in place, actually do the action plans and be transparent about what we're doing and where the success rates or what we aren't doing. But I think the transparency and the communication is what's key there to build the trust. And again, that takes some time. One of the words that was used is, you know, we're detoxing from a previous situation. And some people don't like that term, but it takes a while to get away from what used to be to what we're now trying to build. So that takes time. Good question. Yes?
Why do we have to accept long generational change? Why can't we speed things up?
You know, change is hard. I hope this answer is going to be relevant, or I hope my response is relevant. I had a colleague come to me, and she comes to me. She just happens to be a white woman, and she's largely in her Christian beliefs and things like that. That's just to give you some context of who, you know, she is. And she's been on this journey, and so, you know, her and I have created a relationship. And she comes, you know, and we have conversations, and sometimes we agree, sometimes we don't, but she's always looking to learn. She's always trying to learn. So she came to me several months back, probably, I don't know, probably in June, and she said, Trice, she said, I got something for you. She said, I've been wondering, why haven't I was wondering why my black and brown brothers and sisters haven't taken a page out of the LGBTQ page, because they seem to be able to move their agenda forward pretty quickly over the last 30 years. Okay? And so when you think about the struggles of the black and brown and native communities over the last 200 plus years and why that hasn't moved, my response to her was, you have to understand that I can't take this nose and this hair off. Okay? But the folks that was fighting for LGBTQ plus rights 30 years ago, they could do it covertly. Right? You can go in and be part of these boards and part of these decision-making tables and not wear your flag or not show your flag. You don't have a picture of your significant other, probably same sex, on your desk, and undercover, like, help push that agenda. Does that make sense? So, and it was profound to her. And the question was profound to me too, because I just said it out of pure, this is what I know, and I just threw it out there. But that's what made sense to me. But I think that's a lot of truth in what I just said and my response to your question. Thank you.
It really spoke to what you said about we are creating generational culture of change and not trying to do, not focus on the immediate flashy things. And like sort of speaking from where I've been in the museum district, like there's a lot of desire for immediate change. And from both sides, both management wants to see metrics moving quickly, and a lot of staff want to see these changes actually happening. But yeah, when you said that, it really resonated with me. Like, yeah, we are trying to create a generational culture shift. I guess how do we reconcile this like desire for immediate change that might not last with making long-term, meaningful, permanent changes?
Yeah, that's the $2 billion question. But I think that I think it comes down to what's important, how does it stay important because we are such prisoners of the moment, right? So talking about change and past, I'm gonna bring up some old stuff, but where were we a year ago plus months with the riots and the protests? And that was all over the place because of media. And I know a lot of people were like, well, let's see where we are a year from now. Are we still having this conversation? Is it still this urgency? Is it still this, what it should be? But it's not, because the media has moved on. So what's incumbent up to us and the people that makes these decisions and in our institutions on what this change should be and how do we make it sustainable? What's important? That's why I asked, when you said we're all white in here. Yeah, okay. But is it important to change it? Because if you go with the status quo, and the word that I learned last year was apathy, right? So, I hate to, my body language will tell you a lot, but that's it. You have to take it upon yourselves because there is no magic pill to move the conversation along. I had a young lady ask me, she couldn't have been no more than 20 last week as we talked about, cultural cruise control was the topic at hand. And she kind of asked me the same thing. And she was like, well, if there's not a magic pill, what are you saying? Saying there's not a silver bullet. You know what I'm saying? It's like, this is work. This is generational work. But like he just said, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't. But the power structures. So I try to stay not too extreme on one way or the other. I just want to answer the questions. But it's in front of you. You're like, you have the power. You have the power. I looked at your executive board. I think I was telling them I've been looking at via Twitter and via some other virtual pieces of really just looking to see what your folks have been doing. And I'm interested. I'm a nerd. I'm a learner. So this thing right here, it got me all blown away. Like, I want to go over there right now and stick my head in it. Point in that is, like, I see what you are, and I know what you're doing. I know what you're talking about. I know what you want to do, but you have to have the conversations with yourselves and force the change, right? You can do it.
In fear of looking for that magic pill, I'm just looking for a little advice.
Yes.
How do we find community partners to start building that trust relationship, to put ourselves out there and to reach wider communities? Like, how would we identify a good community partner to work with?
This is gonna seem really simple. Ask.
Okay.
Honestly, like, you put the invite out there, put yourselves out there, humble yourselves. Cultural humility is huge, not cultural competence, but cultural humility. Be curious, ask questions, put it out there that I don't know everything and I'm trying to learn and I'm about to step all over my tongue with my foot in my mouth, but please forgive me. I do it all the time. And again, but I think that's the simple fight, that's the simple answer, but I think that to just make that first step, that's part of it. And to understand that you're not going to get it right? You're not going to get it right?
May I build on what you said?
Please.
Ask, of course. But ask again.
Yep.
Because people sometimes are asked because it meets some checkbox, and they're tired of that. And they're busy people. They don't necessarily answer. But if you try again and they see, oh, she's serious, oh, she actually means it, then you're starting to build that trust. Because there are a lot of people who ask who don't mean it.
Yep. I'm going to get out of your way because I'm in between you and snack time, and I don't want to do that. I really don't. You might be looking at me like, all right, guy, this was good, but please leave. I got a steak waiting. But you had a question back here.
Just a request from the chat. Would you mind repeating the questions?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. But that question was, how do we take the step forward to be open to the community? Was that fair enough? Yes. To actually, and I said the answer was to just invite folks. You know, please.
I know you want to let us get to the food, but I'd like to end on a positive note, which is on the topic of a generational change. I think that might be changing faster and faster exponentially as we're going, because we're finally giving people the tools and the training and the language to make the effective change.
Yeah.
So not just making an awareness, but again, giving them conversational skills and tools to make sure, like you said, focus on the positive and not the negative, come at it with the right approach, and realize what you have in common. So I have hope that slowly, as this, like your job included and many others, it's going to start rolling faster.
And I want to double tap on that. I'm very optimistic and encouraged, like honestly, by just the conversation of saying, hey, we're all white in here. You know, so that piece right there was something that I haven't heard in a room like this probably ever. And then the conversation that come behind it that was more encouraging around it. And it's not a slap, it's an awareness. Awareness, education, exposure, now practice. Anything else? Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Mark, really quick, I want to make sure that we give a round of applause to Mark and Steve for the planning committee and the planning committee for this thing. Thank you. Appreciate it. And I want to thank you for listening and all your questions and engagement. And to the people in the virtual world, sorry we didn't get to you, but yes, thank you. Have a good one. Enjoy dinner.